All right, good morning. It's a brand new week, and I kept thinking this was Tammy's birthday week, but her birthday's on the 22nd. That's actually next Monday, so I said, hey, sorry. Not really. We're still going to celebrate. We celebrate the whole month anyway, but yeah. So what's going on in your world? I hope it's a great one. And man, we had a great weekend. I hope you did. I'm trying to catch up with all my kids, basically. So moving to part-time, let me take the first few Fridays that I'm off and just go see kids. So 2 weekends ago, we went to see the Nashville Pardews, and this weekend I went to see the Peachtree City Pardews, and what a great time just hanging out. We did some duck pin bowling, big fun. So that was good. We did that with the grandkids and all. It was a lot of fun doing that. Last Thursday night, went to see some hockey. That was fun. And then yesterday was church. Yesterday was Valentine's, so we had lunch date and just some great times. I hope you're enjoying your friends and your family and all that's going on. I hope you have rich relationships. There's nothing more powerful than just communicating with another soul, right? And for us, man, our adult kids are a joy to be around, and so we love doing that. Got some great friends I love hanging out with, and that's what we do. So a couple things before we jump into this. So I thought I was going to be able to go live Facebook and YouTube today. They apparently want you to be an hour out, and normally I set up about 45 minutes out. So I got to do that tomorrow. But Lord willing, you'll be able to kind of just watch it on YouTube if you're moving from one to the other, if it's easier for you, whatever that is. Then I've also, on that YouTube channel, cataloged all of the teachings that we've done since COVID began back in April. So they're in playlists. So if you want to see, if you just want to go find 1 Peter and look at it, or 2 Peter, or John, 1 John, or whatever they are, they're all in there for you. Instead of having to scroll through Facebook on my page and kind of finding them, you don't have to sit through all the junk. You can just get right to it. So that's on YouTube. I think you can find Randy Pardue. There's a doctor. That's not me. And then there's me. So look for that, and we'll see what happens. So today we're back in the book of Titus, chapter 1. We're going to finish up chapter 1 today. And he's on the tirade of false teachers. And don't let this be something you slide by and think, well, I don't know if I need that or not. Listen, we all need to be careful about what we hear and what we allow to move into our mind. And so he helps us understand the dangers of those and the evils of that and why it can't be tolerated. And so I'm not going to rehash all of that. We're in the middle. I will tell you what we looked at Friday. For there are many. He talked about refuting false teachers, and basically we see from him that there's 3 things that we should do. One, shut the door on them, right? You just don't give them access. Don't give them a platform. Don't give them a Sunday school class if you're a pastor or whatever. Don't do that. If they're in your world, hey, don't slow down on your channel surfing and watch that. Don't get mesmerized by those things. Shut the door. Don't give them a platform to those things. Second thing is study and refute whatever it was that they were saying in that sense, or that you have maybe heard that's wrong. You need to study for yourself and be able to refute those things. And then third, just live a solid life. That's how the church, that's what a church should be doing in order to combat that. So then, who are we dealing with? Who's Paul instructing Timothy? Who's Timothy dealing with? And this is what we're looking at today, who they are. And so he jumps into this a little more in detail than last week. Or Friday when we looked at it. And so let's just read it, and then we'll just make some comments and be on our way. One of them, a prophet of their own, one of them meaning a false teacher, one of them, a prophet of their own, said, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, and lazy gluttons. Now, that was Epimenides that said that. He was a Greek scholar, probably one of the, I think, in the category what they call the 7 wisest men of Greece. So that was what he said about him. Paul took his words, turned them against him, and said, yeah, that's exactly who we're dealing with. This testimony is true. For this reason, reprimand them severely, so they may be sound in the faith, not paying attention to Jewish myths and commands of men who turn away from the truth. To the pure, all things are pure, but to those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. But both mind and their conscience are defiled. They profess to know God, but by their deeds they deny him, being detestable, disobedient, and worthless of anything good. Wow. All right, pretty straightforward, right? Let's just kind of dive into it and look at it. So there was this saying that they had. In fact, the word in the Greek for lying, one of the words is kritos, which is the word for Crete, right? They were Cretans. So their city became synonymous with that. That would be like us saying, man, he's a Birmingham, meaning, like he's a liar. He's from Birmingham. So it's kind of a weird how you would take that land and then it just became synonymous with liars. And but that was that was his statement. This isn't Paul's statement. This was one of their own. They're liars. Now listen. Let's just straight up understand. Lying is a terrible sin. We like to say that we don't rank sins. No sin is greater than the other. That's not entirely true. Paul made a statement when he talked about sexual sins, says every other sin a man commits is outside the body. So he signifies that there's something different about that. That's the same place where he says, don't you know your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit? So that doesn't mean that sexual sins get more punishment or anything. We don't grade sins, and there aren't minor sins and listen, sin is an affront to a holy God. But when the writer of the Proverbs says that there were 6 things the Lord hates, 7 which are an abomination to him, lying lips was right up there, along with bearing false witness. So of the 7 sins mentioned that God hates, he mentions lying twice. It was the first sin was pride, but what Satan did was lie. He deceived them. And so it's a terrible thing. And so he says, look, these people are liars, man. They're deceivers, right? They are con people. They're switching bait. And so you just can't have anything to do with that. Then he says they're evil brutes. What he means there is they're baseless, they're shallow, sensual people. That's what an evil brute is. A brute is like one who without brains, right? So they're not thinking with their brain. They're thinking with other parts of their body and their passions, and so they're evil in that. So they're not after holy passions. They're after unholy passions, which would imply the sexual sins that they were prevalent of in that day, seducing other people and all of that. And they're also lazy gluttons. Literally, it means like slow gut. Like they've gotten slow because their gut has gotten so big. So it's kind of interesting that you can almost see a cartoon character develop as you read what he says. But he says, listen, this is who we're dealing with: liars and sensual people of sensual evil brutes, rather, and lazy gluttons. Now it's interesting that Jeremiah ran into the same kind of people. In fact, this is what the whole chapter 23 of Jeremiah blisters false prophets that Jeremiah was dealing with. But this is verse 30 of 23. It says, "Therefore declares the Lord, I am against the prophets who steal from one another words supposedly from me. Yes, declares the Lord, I am against the prophets who wag their own tongues and yet declare, the Lord declares. Indeed, I am against those who prophesy false dreams, declares the Lord. They tell them and lead my people astray with their reckless lies, yet I did not send or appoint them. They do not benefit these people in the least, declares the Lord." What he's saying is, listen, you got a lot of false people out there saying they're in the name of God, and God's going, listen, they don't represent me. I don't care what they're saying. They don't represent me. We should know who those people are. These are wolves in sheep's clothing in that sense. And so Paul is determined that these people would understand who they are. So he says, first of all, who they are. They're Cretans, they're liars, they're evil beasts, lazy gluttons. He says this testimony is true. For this reason, what are we going to do? Reprimand them severely so they may be sound in the faith. That word reprimand, apothumos, is 2 words. To cut, like to sharply cut. That's how, like if you were going to take a tree down or split some wood with one blow of the axe, that's a thumos. It's one cut, one sharp, severe cut. And then he says, cut off. That apothumos means to sharply cut off. So what that means is you don't really enter into debate. You don't go, well, now listen, everybody has a side. We want to hear from all sides. No, you don't. We want to hear truth. There are no sides. Again, it goes back to our culture today. There's not your truth and my truth. There's truth. I'm not interested in your truth. I'm interested in the truth. And so what is happening in the political realm and what is happening everywhere else, we're bringing it into the church, and we're giving people a voice that don't deserve a voice. You want to know what's happening in the mega churches? That's where the terrible things are coming from. People are being given small groups in some of these mega churches, and no one knows what they're teaching. Yet they're generating a following, and they're leading people astray. You would say, well, it's not really that big a deal, but it is. And so this is why he says this is important. And now listen, there's some passion in here, compassion in here. He says, for this reason, reprimand them severely, so they may be sound in the faith. What you want to do is try to turn them. Okay, so we're going to cut them off, and then we're going to give them truth and say, now this is where you're wrong. This is why you have to stop teaching those things. And so this is what he's saying to them. So there's a measure of, hey, let's turn them, but don't tolerate them. All right, turn but don't tolerate, and that's kind of the role. Then he says this: not paying attention to Jewish myths and commandments of men who turn away from the truth. So those are the two things that they're doing. And let's real quickly kind of have a little conversation about that, because it's kind of nebulous there. He didn't really get specific, but specific enough for what they're doing that they understood. And so we can draw from that and understand what he's talking about. Jewish myths was a common deal that was going on in those days because of the fact that Christianity came out of the Jewish faith. So there were these old line Jews that were like, I don't like that, so let's how do we get rid of that? Jewish myths was one of them. Special knowledge, insight. The Pharisees had all this. You could see this all woven through. And listen, we have them today. People who have special knowledge, right? Don't you know somebody who's go, well, I was with the Lord, and He took me up to heaven, and I saw this vision, and here's what I saw, and I'm just telling you. Listen, that's Jewish myths, right? New revelation, something added to the Gospels. Like, well, this wasn't in the Scriptures, but this is what God's doing today. When I hear those kind of things, I'm realizing I'm dealing with somebody that needs to be sharply cut off and then reprimanded to help understand what truth is all about. The other thing is human commands. That's just legalistic rules, right? So, Jesus dealt with those. The Pharisees were just like that. They had all these rules. One of the rules that they took from the Scriptures was, the Sabbath. Though you shouldn't really travel anywhere on the Sabbath, and so they would get on to people if they did anything on the Sabbath. If they worked, and work for them was doing anything. But for the Pharisee, they would take a rock from their house, because you could only go so many steps according to their rule before you weren't at home and you'd begun to travel. Then you sinned and broke the Sabbath. Then they would drop that rock there, and that became kind of a temporary house base. And then they would go a little further, drop another rock from their field, and they could go wherever they wanted. This was how silly this stuff was. Now, today, we have a lot of legalistic rules even today. You have people that are always imposing. Well, if you're a good Christian, they don't do this, and they don't do that. And that's why Paul told the Corinthian church, hey, listen, all things are lawful. Now, all things aren't profitable, but all things are lawful. Meaning that God has given us freedom. We can eat pork today. We can eat shellfish today, thank the Lord. But you're going to have some who tell you can't do this, you can't do that, and they've got all these man-made rules. And he's saying, hey, listen, this is what they do. And then he comes to the final thing, and he says, to the pure, all things are pure, but to those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure, but both their mind and their consciences are defiled. See, they thought, now that doesn't mean to the pure all things are pure, like we think in a wholesome way, although that is the truth. He's kind of slamming them. To the pure, to those who think they're pure, all things are pure. So what he was doing was bashing them, and they understood in the context here. They were saying, hey, listen, we really have arrived at this special place because we know things that y'all don't know. And so now we don't, our sexual sins aren't sexual sins. They're really glorifying to the Lord. See how sick and twisted this is? And this was what they were doing. They were saying, oh yeah, we don't really sin anymore. We're good. To the pure, all things are pure. But that's not true. Inwardly, he says, but inwardly, they're defiled. Both their mind and their conscience are defiled. They're not pure at all. And that's true of all of the false teachers. There's great hypocrisy They do one thing, and then you find this scandal in their life somewhere else. Both their mind and their conscience is defiled. He says, they profess one thing, but they do another. So they proclaim they love God, but every action they do violates the love of God, the law of God. And so he comes down to this: they're detestable, disobedient, and worthless. That's what they are. And so, we have to be people who are aware that these false teachers are doing wrong. We've tolerated way too much. The Benny Hinns of the world, and the Kenneth Copelands, and the Creflo Dollars, and all the other ilk like them. And you may like some of them, but I'm telling you, they're the ones that Paul would be talking about here. They're propagating evil things. They're detestable, they're disobedient, and they're worthless to the kingdom of God. In fact, Jesus, when he the hardest things he had to say were to the Pharisees. And he said, "You men have made them twice a son of hell." I mean, he was saying that the Pharisees had responsibility as oversight and leaders of some people, yet they were binding them by the law, so they made them twice the son of hell. What he meant was that they gave them these rules so that these people would think that they were saved by the keeping of rules, and so you made them twice the son of hell. In other words, they were on their way to hell, and then if they hear the truth, and then you add these works to them, now they think they're saved, but they're still going to hell. And so this is the danger. This is why we come down so hard on these false teachers. The gospel is not about rules and Jewish myths. The gospel is about the fact that I was desperately dead in my trespasses and sins, but God, being rich in mercy, made me alive. And the only rule that I have now, two things got me to that place: to confess and to believe. Right? I confess that I am who He says I am, dirty, rotten, stinking little sinner. And I believe that He paid for all of my sin, past, present, and future, and I'm going to live in light of that. Then the only admonition that I have at that point is to love the Lord my God with all my heart, soul, and strength, and love my neighbor as myself, and understand the truth and live it. And so let's be those people, all right? Man, love you guys. Have a great day. I will see you in the morning.